We're here today to foster a deeper understanding of the factors, issues, challenges, and opportunities surrounding a vibrant blue economy and to strengthen dialogue, networking, collaboration, and cooperation, and ensuring the inclusion of stakeholders in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. This can include economic sectors from the more conventional fisheries, aquaculture, maritime transportation, coastal marine and maritime tourism, or other traditional uses, to emerging economic activities such as renewable energy, seabed mining, and bioprospecting. The CRFM is the executing agency for the US 48 million project titled BCLME Plus, promoting national blue economic priorities through marine spatial planning in the Caribbean, large marine ecosystem plus. Funded by the Global Environment Facility, GEF, through this project, the CRFM will explore strengthening the integration of fisheries and ecosystem management to restore, protect, and maintain diversity, productivity, and resilience of marine ecosystems. Our presenters are Milton Haughton, Juli-Anne Russo, Michael Braynen, and Leo Brewster, who will have the very difficult task to make their presentations on this very important topic in only 10 minutes. In the interest of time, I will not read their impressive bios, but I encourage you to read them for yourselves. I would also like to remind you that at the end of the presentations, we'll have the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the CRFM and the Caribbean Private Sector Organization. This MOU will facilitate collaboration and developing of investment and business plans. Then a moderated discussion will follow on levering opportunities and strategies for unlocking the full blue economic potential of the Caribbean, where we welcome your questions and we'll expect and get some real insightful answers from the participants in the room and our presenters. And definitely we like our online participants to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try and make sure that we have them answered. Our first presenter is Milton Haughton, and he will be presenting on understanding the Caribbean blue economy and the unique historical, cultural, and socio-economic value of fisheries and aquaculture for equitable, sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So let's jump right into it. Dr. Bellamy has already given you a brief overview on the blue economy, what we are talking about when we use the term blue growth. So it is really a new and emerging concept for sustainable economic growth based on the oceans and the ocean resources. You know, as small island developing states, we have all been very dependent on our oceans, both in the Caribbean and the Pacific, you know, in the African region. Small island developing states, by virtue of their limited land space and resources, have depended a lot on the oceans and the seas for their foods and jobs. Now, in 2012 and in the months leading up to the Rio Plus 20 conference, in the preparatory meetings, the SIDS realized that something was amiss because the focus was on green growth and other type of development. And they realized that, look, at the end of the day, our growth, our development, our future rests in the sea. And we're not talking about that domain and the resources of the oceans. And so they started focusing attention on growth and economic development from the oceans and the issues and challenges regarding ocean economies and therefore blue growth. So one of the interesting things is the fact that it is SIDS and other developing coastal states that were behind the initiative to develop a blue economy strategy. So this process and this concept and construct of looking at the ocean's resources and its challenges and how we can maximize the potential benefits to our societies from the ocean is a SIDS and coastal state-led initiative. Now, blue economy conceptualizes ocean as a development space where holistic tools such as spatial planning or marine spatial planning integrates conservation and sustainable use of the living and the non-living resources and their potential. It is a framework for developing countries and SIDS that addresses equity in access to, development of, and sharing of benefits from our marine living resources and other marine non-living resources. The potential of the oceans and seas to meet sustainable development needs are enormous, but they must be maintained or restored to healthy and productive state if we're going to realize long-term sustainable benefits. The blue economy approach offers the opportunity for sustainable development that is better suited to the needs, the circumstances, the aspirations, the objectives, the constraints, and the challenges facing small island developing states like ours and coastal developing states. Sorry. Right, okay. Now, blue economy will normally include a number of different sectors and activities, and some were mentioned already. Our focus is on the living marine resources and aquaculture potential in this area. But some of the others already mentioned briefly by Gavin: transportation, ports, tourism, marine biotechnology, saltwater desalination, deep sea mining, oil and gas, renewable energy from a number of sources: wave energy, wind energy, tidal energy, ocean thermal energy, etc. You know, it's a significant source of potential renewable energy. Ship and boat building, maritime construction, defense and security, as well as research and education. So there are many and significant dimensions beyond just the living marine resources. But for present purposes, our focus is really on the living marine resources. Okay. So let's look at some of the key aspects of the concept of blue growth. It's about balancing growth and development. That's the heart of it. Recognizing that we need to use the resources, but we have to be careful to ensure that we do not overexploit and destroy, deplete the resources as we move on. It's also balancing private sector growth and also benefits to local communities. And so, you know, these are issues that are at the forefront of SIDS concerns. It's about creating decent jobs from the oceans and seas for our people. SIDS also have a significant concern, and other coastal states, regarding the need to reflect their needs in the development of the area beyond the national jurisdiction. No, I know many of us, we really don't even think about the high seas and the area beyond national jurisdiction. But the reality is this: we have a legal right to accessing and using the resources in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. And so at the end of the day, we really shouldn't, and the developed countries, the big countries, big developing countries, shouldn't be just going headlong and doing what they want to do and totally ignoring us because we don't have the capacity. So what we're saying here and what the blue economy approach and strategy is basically saying is that we have to recognize that we have some states that are dependent on the marine resources, even though they do not now have the capacity to fully utilize. And you have to make accommodation to ensure that they can, at some point, begin to access and utilize these resources that we have a legal right to, even though they're not under our sovereignty or jurisdiction. Very, very important. And then there's the issue of economic diversification. We need to diversify our economy from the limited traditional sectors, tourism, agriculture, fisheries, etc. So the Blue Growth provides us with that opportunity to go beyond these traditional sectors, and also even within sector, like within fisheries, begin to diversify and utilize the wide array of living marine resources that we have available, whether it is seaweed, like sargassum, and the hundreds of others that are there, to deep resources that we are not now touching. We don't even know what they are. And also, of course, improve food security. And a key here is private sector involvement. Aquaculture is a very important part, and mariculture. Aquaculture is growing, the fastest growing food production sector for a number of years now. Aquaculture is now producing more than 50% of the total global fish production. However, in the region, we are only contributing about 7%. So, we have a lot of catching up to do, and we can do it. It can be done. And so, but of course, we need to do certain things to get there. All right, moving on quickly because I know time is running out very fast. Now, there are many challenges facing blue economic growth, and many of these have been mentioned since we have been here. Climate change, acidification, etc., pollution, unsustainable fishing, IUU fishing, the lack of infrastructure and technology, enhanced private sector involvement and investment that's needed, weak governance and regulatory system, limited data and information and knowledge of the resources that we are aiming to utilize, maritime boundary delimitation. Many of our countries still haven't delimited their boundaries, and until you know where your boundaries lie, it may pose some difficulty. Limited capacity and expertise, and the issue of equity that was mentioned already, and financing and insurance. I'm turning now to the project that Gavin mentioned. Project entitled Promoting Blue Economy Priorities Through Marine Spatial Planning in the Caribbean Region. This is a $48 million project funded by the GEF, executed by the CRFM. The implementing partners are the Development Bank of Latin America and Food and Agriculture Organization. I'll just skip through this slide and go to the next. The objective is to promote blue economic development in the Caribbean region, in our countries, and focusing on marine spatial planning, marine protected area, fisheries value chain development, and in a climate smart manner. There are three components to the project: the marine spatial planning and marine protected area, sustainable value chain, fisheries value chain development, and knowledge management, project coordination, etc. So three key components. So in conclusion, the whole purpose of the Blue Economic Initiative and concept is to strengthen the foundation the whole purpose of the project is to strengthen the foundation for blue economic growth and resilience in the region based on the marine living resources. We're seeking to improve marine biodiversity conservation and management. Improving marine biodiversity conservation and management through area-based management tools to support sustainable fisheries. Supporting seafood value chain development to add value, improve income to fishers and fishing communities, and wealth for our nations. Climate smart, gender sensitive, participatory, inclusive approach, and the blue growth approach has the potential to create sustainable and prosperous future balancing economic development and environmental stewardship. So in a nutshell, that's a brief overview and introduction to what we're focusing on this afternoon. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So 10 minutes.
No,
Plus one.
No, plus two. Thank you very much, Milton. You tried your best to stay within time. Didn't make it. Now, our next presentation will be on the national perspective on blue economic growth in the Caribbean, the Bahamian experience. So, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman. My name is Michael Braynen, and I'm a former director of the Department of Marine Resources here in the Bahamas. And I emphasize former. And before I get to my very first slide after this one, I want to make a couple points. I do not speak as a government official. I have no political affiliation. I am not an economist. Any dollars that I mentioned in my presentation are US dollars, and my focus at Milton's request has been on living marine resources in those aspects of the blue economy in the Bahamas. I hope you will see why I made those other disclaimers as we go forward. Okay, so the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, where we all are, many of you are visiting, and I want to show you an image of the Bahamas from outer space, and you will see that it's mostly blue. It's mostly water. The vast majority of what composes the Bahamas is, in fact, the sea. The other thing I want to bring to your attention very quickly, since you've been here and you would have seen this flag many, many times. The point I want to make about the flag is that it is mostly blue. And it's a very special blue. It's called aquamarine. Apparently, it's a very difficult color to reproduce, and that's why you will see flags with all sorts of blues in it, but this is the proper color, aquamarine. And there are two aquamarine stripes, and that should give you an indication of how significant and important the marine part of the Bahamas is and was to the people who designed the flag, and that's what we have had for the past 50 years. Okay, so my question at the top of the slide is, will small-scale fisheries and aquaculture get lost in the mix? And that's the blue economy mix. Some of you may have seen this particular image yesterday. It comes from Scotland and is indicating what they see their blue economy as. Everybody has a slightly different one. I borrowed this one from Bangladesh, and you can see there are many, many, many components. And we as fisheries and aquaculture people will look at these images and wonder, where do we fit into all of this with all of the big numbers being tossed around? Where are we going to fit? What is our contribution going to be? Are we going to be overlooked and overshadowed by those other things? In some countries, when you start talking about oil and gas, for example, then you're talking about the millions and millions and billions of dollars, and who cares about fish at that point? And that, but of course, that's important to us, as Milton has said. So, aspects of the blue economy in the Bahamas. The exclusive economic zone is about 260,000 square miles with 5% land and 95% water. Okay, the blue economy's economic contribution to the Bahamas GDP is estimated to be about 21.5%, with related impacts 50%, and I believe actually it is more than that. But as I said, I am not an economist. I'm just making guesstimates. Those numbers were in fact given to us by economists. So the blue economy is very, very important, very significant in the Bahamas, and always has been. The last one, I put it in a different color because we talk about tourism, and as you probably have figured out, those of you who don't live here, the economy of the Bahamas is largely based upon tourism. And tourism in the Bahamas and many other places in the Caribbean rides firmly on the back of our marine ecosystems. Okay? So, I think I missed a slide. Did I? No, I did not. Okay, I just mentioned tourism, And I call him in the slide the tourism giant. And you can see, this image that I really hate to use, but I used it anyway, because it congratulates the Bahamas on achieving, 7.2 million visitors, right? Estimates are at the end of this year, we will reach 8 million. Most of those visitors are coming by sea, 71%. On my way home from here yesterday, I passed the dock and there were 6 large cruise ships in the port. So we get a lot of people coming to the Bahamas, and it's all a part of the blue economy. And I was very interested to hear the remarks from the gentleman from Dominica yesterday, and he indicated that, to use my terms, they're not going to let tourism destroy their blue economy. And I have to ask ourselves the same question: are we going to let tourism destroy our blue economy just because it looks like dollars? Okay, maybe I'll come back to that. Maybe somebody will ask me a question. And personally, I hate the whole concept of swimming with pigs, but it has worked for the Bahamas for some reason. But we also got swimming with sharks and swimming with turtles and swimming with all sorts of things. The pigs thing bothers me. Feels good to be able to say that. And I don't care who's offended. Okay, so Bahamas commercial landings, rate and value, they're pretty extensive on a regional basis. Most of our fishery is based on spiny lobster in terms of value. In terms of exports, in 2020, we exported $77 million worth of products from the Bahamas. So our commercial fishery is very significant in our local economy. Okay, now, here comes the economics part of it. Hope there's nobody from the IDB in the room, because I don't want to misrepresent what they have done. Post-COVID, the Bahamas engaged the IDB to do a study about the impact of COVID and how the economy could be moved ahead after that. And the IDB report came to a number of conclusions, but it kept repeating the importance of the blue economy and recommended using the blue economy as a means of propelling the Bahamas forward in the future and to allow the Bahamas to develop the kind of economy that could stand the shocks of climate change and pandemics and all of those sorts of things that might be in our future. Well, the climate change certainly is. So the IDB made a large number of recommendations in this report, which I've had a look at, and it really, really emphasized the blue economy. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. On the local scene, my heading says local political blue economy buy-in, or promises. In the Bahamas, like most countries in our region, there are 2 main political parties. We had political elections, general elections in 2021. Each major political party made it a point to mention the blue economy in their documents leading up to the general election. And I see nods from Jamaica, so that means that everybody else did the same thing. Okay, so in blue, we have some of the proclamations made by the Progressive Liberal Party. And in red, we have the proclamations made by the Free National Movement. They were the former government. The PLP is the current government. They all said pretty much the same kinds of things. They all recognize the importance of the blue economy. They all promise they're going to do this, that, and the other to advance the blue economy in the future. Now, what's the good part about all of this? First is that they recognize it. The second thing about it is that the present government has continued much of the work in the blue economy that the former government had started. So it has not fallen by the wayside. The other thing I can mention very quickly is the present Prime Minister has become a champion of climate change in the region, and I'm hoping that he will give a similar amount of energy to blue economy initiatives that will assist the Bahamas and the region as well. So Resulting from that IDB report, the IDB has approved the project. The date there is February 2022. This is a $200 million policy-based guarantee project for the Bahamas, and it is addressing all sorts of aspects of the blue economy in the Bahamas. That's a lot of money, and that's why I'm not an economist. I am hopeful that some of this money will actually make real differences in the Bahamas and to those who are involved with or want to become involved with the blue economy. It remains to be seen whether this will happen or not. But it certainly seems, from all that is written and all that is included in this project document, that the IDB is very serious about embracing the blue economy and using it as a means to help countries in the region. That's the 10 minutes. You started early. No, you didn't start early. You did. Okay. So there are a number of things in the blue economy pipeline that I was made aware of, largely from the Department of Marine Resources. I mentioned already the IDB projects. I know that the Department of Marine Resources is approaching FAO for some assistance in agriculture to further aquaculture to develop further in the Bahamas, because it's really nowhere right now, nowhere significant. The DMR is doing some work with turtle ecotourism. They are doing some work with trying to get a resource assessment for sea cucumbers. There's ongoing work with regards to flats fishing. That's a form of recreational fishing in the Bahamas. And there is a coordinating committee on the blue economy established some time ago. Now, that coordinating committee has people on it from various sectors. We've got public works, finance, environment, transport, local government, National GIS Center, the Development Bank, agriculture, and marine resources. In my mind, it remains to be seen how effective this committee will be, but it is from there that I am hoping that the general direction and coordination will come to guide the Bahamas forward in this particular area. Okay? There are also NGOs that are supposed to be a part of that committee as well. So that's my very brief and very rushed presentation, and I got in under the wire, and Milton beat me a second or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that presentation. Now, our next presentation will be by Dr. Russo, Unlocking the Caribbean's Aquaculture Potential Through Mariculture and Coastal Aquaculture. And this is very important because, if you know, it's only 3.8% of the world's aquaculture production comes from the Latin America and Caribbean region. So we're lagging way behind. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and we are not participating. So please, Dr. Russo, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to try to make that 10 minutes, so let's see.
We'll help you.
So I am the founder of the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub, and we are a newly formed team of Caribbean aquaculture scientists. We are dedicated to building the technical capacity for a sustainable aquaculture and mariculture industry in the CARICOM region. So where are we today in mariculture and aquaculture? As Dr. Bellamy just said, we are very behind. In the FAO 2022 report, Global Fisheries report, it actually says that we are insignificant on a global scale. So we know that it's a hugely untapped resource. So we know that aquaculture protects and preserves. We can use mariculture as a means of marine conservation, for food security, and for creating jobs. Our traditional aquaculture, as we know it, tilapia and freshwater shrimp, has declined significantly in the last 20 years, probably. And we have the potential, especially like in Jamaica, for freshwater and marine aquarium fish as an industry to create jobs, but that still hasn't gotten off, to where it should be. So what are some of the challenges? The challenges, especially for the smaller islands, are land and access to fresh water. This is, of course, with the exception of Jamaica and possibly Guyana. Affordable feed, the importation of feed. I mean, that's a serious challenge, especially, during the pandemic when everything shut down. How are they to get feed in? Affordable energy, technical assistance. We are lacking, I think Jamaica has one of the best technical assistance in terms of extension, but in other islands, there's a serious lacking capacity for, extension agents going out into the fields. And then we have our climate change. We have flooding, droughts, hurricanes, which are adding to the problems of continued aquaculture. Aquaponics, however, is on the rise, but it's still very much small in its infancy. So I've been on a personal this year at the, how do you go back? At the start of our organization, I've been on a personal quest to try to document all the different mariculture activities that are happening in the Caribbean. And all of these groups are actually under our hub. So we have sea plants, or you want to call it seaweed, and in St. Lucia and in other small islands, they call it sea moss. We have Belize, St. Lucia, Dominica, and Jamaica. And Belize and St. Lucia, although on a very small scale and still in its infancy, are growing and doing much, much more. Jamaica, we have the Key Farms, which is a developing private organization that is starting. As we can see, I started with seaweed because this is very traditional. We grew up with Irish moss. Even long before we knew what it was, they've been developing the Irish moss strain. But however, that species that they use, the Gracilaria, is actually been fished out. And so they brought in new species, which is Euchema and Capophycus. These, for this industry, the challenges, again, are climate change. Our water is warming, acidification. These are some of the things that we need to look at to continue growing this industry, as well as manuals and marine spatial planning. The next industry is the sea cucumber industry. Panacea Life is the first open ocean sea cucumber hatchery in Panama. And they are on a mission to take what they've learned from a scientific point of view to bring it to other places in the Caribbean. So their option is to do scientific research for helping restoring the sea cucumber industry, which is, again, not controlled and is in the potential to be overfished. Some of the research that they're doing, as you can see in the photo, is the algae production. That's another industry in itself that we can start looking at. They actually took, I don't know, maybe 5 years to come up with a formula for the algae production to produce their sea cucumbers inside in their hatchery. So again, I have all the names of the organizations, so if you're interested, you can reach out to them. We have sea urchins. So again, we're not only looking at food security, but we're looking at marine conservation, and all of these things create jobs. So in Puerto Rico, at the Institute for Socio-Ecological Research, Dr. Stacy Williams is looking at having the first sea urchin hatchery where they take the larvae, produce them inside, and then put them back out into the ocean. So basically what's been happening, I don't know if you've read about the sea urchins dying, there have been massive die-offs. And so in this way, they're very important for coral reef recovery. In this way, in having that aquaculture industry, they can now restore the oceans. We have heard of conch. Conch is very important for Bahamas. In Jamaica, we're at the in collaboration with the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. Dr. Megan Davis, she's on a mission to have a hatchery around the Caribbean, and in Jamaica. She has worked extensively in Puerto Rico. She's done some work in Bahamas, and in Jamaica, she's starting with a hatchery to do conservation and restoration. We have our oyster culture. which is currently happening with the NFA in Jamaica. And then some of the issues that are coming about that we still need to look at again is climate change and the warming of our waters, where the increase in temperatures has slowed the production of oysters, and we really need to start looking at what is the future going to be for oyster production. Here in the Bahamas, we have the Caribbean Spiny Lobster Research at the Island School, where I'm currently with, where they're trying to restore as well as provide economy for the local communities. So there's a 3% survival rate for lobsters. And so what they're trying to do is to take the larvae using a artificial capsule, and then take the larvae, post-larvae, put them inside the lab, raise them, and then to put them back out into the ocean to help with that restoration, as well as some of the larvae can go to, once they've figured it out, go to the community where they can also raise lobsters for food. So that's another option as well. So the meat that is just a pilot I have found. I'm sure there are others, and we're going to continue looking for the other forms. There's also coral aquaculture, which I didn't get into as yet. So moving forward, the number one thing is to change the cultural mindset. How do we change that mindset that aquaculture is more than just going around in the hot sun, tilapia by the pond? It is a lot more than that. As a group, we are trying to highlight that aquaculture needs to be in STEM and looked at from a scientific point of view in order to be competitive with the world. We cannot compete with Asia, we cannot compete with Europe. They are already at that scientific level, and we need to bring it to that point of view. The first thing is capacity building for our skills. We can go and dig a pond, we can go and build structures for farmers, but if we don't have enough science or enough technical skills, going out into the field, helping the farmers, if we do aquaponics and we give them a kit, they still need to have people going out there helping them on a weekly basis, literally. So we need to have a whole range of technical assistants or trained people, from the science to the extension officers to the trainers. We need data collectors. We don't have enough data. If we're talking about climate change and we want to prove our climate change, where is the data to show that our seas are warming? Where's acidification data? We can model that, but where is the actual information? So we need people to start collecting that data. As citizen scientists, we need to start using our communities and having them being included in some of this information, going out to collect that data. Okay, I'm trying my best. The cooperatives, we need the collaboration. The science is already out there, so let's not reinvent the wheel. And we also need insurance. Investment. The investment has to be in R&D and innovation. That is the only way forward. So we really need to start developing. We're currently working at the Island School, developing aqua feeds for small farmers. We need to start looking at the genetics, the genetic diversity, and climate smart technologies such as apps. So I invite you to our very untapped potential, our Caribbean research scientists at our hub. And I'd like to introduce you to the new face of the blue economy. It's primarily women. There are actually more women scientists than there are men. And so we have a group of women in Caribbean aquaculture, and we cover all different sectors of aquaculture and mariculture. And I invite you to see what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russo. Thank you very much for that presentation. And definitely we'll get into some of the points you mentioned, but notice you spoke a lot without mentioning about management, control, and enforcement to get some of the resources to a sustainable level. But next we have a presentation. This will be an online presentation by Dr. Brewster, balancing competing interests through marine spatial planning and intersectoral coordination and collaboration. So please, Dr. Brewster, it's your time.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do this afternoon is just run through quickly the approaches that Barbados has taken towards marine spatial planning and the coordination activities between ourselves and as the Coastal Zone Management Unit and the other agencies that we work with. So our focus has always been at the Coastal Zone Management Unit, looking from the coast inland. And in 1999, 2000, we came up with this plan of the coastline where what we actually found was the coastline was divided into 8 separate unique sectors, which are each contrastingly different from every other sector. We set the boundaries in terms of what we thought our coastal management area ought to be. And as I said, because we were mainly focusing on the coastline, we looked mainly at the immediate coastal zone area, which could be impacted up to the 100-year storm inundation line. And for the Atlantic side, which is the more raw exposed side, we looked at landscape characteristics to determine the inland limit of penetration. And for the Caribbean side, or our west coast, for the seaward boundaries, we only went offshore to the 200-meter seaward edge of the cliff. In doing that, we found that we had to accept that given the 2 contrasting coastlines, the Atlantic coastline has a much shorter shelf, and therefore we could only go up to the 100-meter depth contour, because after that, it starts to drop really quickly into very deep water. And I'm talking about after 100 meters, you drop to like 300, 400 meters, and then you go down and it's 600, 800 meters, and you haven't traveled that far away from the shoreline. Okay, so less than half a kilometer, 100 meters, and then immediately after that, by 750 meters or so, you're down to 1,000 meters. We have long been focused on ocean science and coastal science activity, given our work. And as I said before, we've always looked at the transition from the land to the sea, especially the impacts on the near shore. And this just gives you a feel for the sort of work that we've been focused on from more or less 96 to present. We've been in existence since 1983, and therefore we've had a long-standing arrangement in terms of how we look at the coastline systematically and sequentially in terms of even how the office has developed. But it was really in the late 90s to present that we started to focus on things like oceanographic characterization, especially of the East Coast. We started to look at the use of oceanographic equipment more importantly. And in 2013 to 2019, we now started to look at the use of wave rider buoys for deep ocean information, while we were still using the AWACS for which are the seabed mounted sort of oceanographic equipment for the nearshore monitoring and coastal wave recording of information. And we've also looked at detailed LiDAR, as in sub-meter LiDAR profiling for the island, as well as the bathymetric LiDAR out to the 40-meter contour, which is the most effective. We now have to get into deep water assessments. Barbados has always been a maritime nation, and as a part of that, we've always tried to look at the aspects of how the sea has worked for Barbados in terms of fishing, shipping, and transshipment. We've always tried to manage our waters within our own jurisdictions, and it still falls to the responsibility of the central government to look at that. And we've also looked at how our own development of the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan, which now incorporates disaster risk management as a major feature, can now be characterized as a sectoral approach for involving different stakeholder players along the way. Since 1999, we've been very conscious of the need to have stakeholder players in terms of how the coastal plan has to be developed, implemented, and as part of the rollout, have the necessary public feedback along the way. The areas of immediate concern for us are obviously in terms of looking at how now can we look at the broader maritime space, because we've been more or less designated as Coastal Zone Management Unit to look to be the executor, as I'll get to the next slide, on the marine spatial planning process. What we do recognize is that because the ocean has always been an open access status for many aspects of the maritime space. We have a limited management of the resources, general exploitation of easily accessible resources, and the sector silo approach is still continuing in terms of how regulation and management of several of the maritime sectors that constitute the blue economy actually are implemented. And there's always been limited public participation in the decision-making process for how the ocean space is going to be rolled out, managed into the future. Just some basic facts. We, like the rest of the Caribbean, are very small, as you would realize. We're only 432 square kilometers of landmass. Coastline itself is only 97 kilometers long. But our maritime space is upwards of 186,000, 187,000 square kilometers. So the EEZ that we have, which is shown up there in red, is approximately 400 times larger than the island mass of Barbados, 425 times larger, as some people like to say. We've negotiated the majority of our EEZ boundaries with our neighbors to the north and to the west, but we still have some further negotiations to do with some of those to the south. And we're hoping to get those done within the next 3 years. But we have a total space now of our EEZ because of the bid block diagram that you see there that has already been set aside for offshore oil and gas exploration. So when we start to talk about how you're going to deal with marine spatial planning, we have to use the actual offshore bid blocks as maybe the foundation mapping process for where we are and what's available in terms of potential space for right now as a starting point to carry out, so people are aware, because many people don't aware of the bid block designations that we have. So as part of the work that we've been working on since about late 2019 up until the mid-2020s, when we were the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, we started to work with the dedicated assistance to the Nature Conservancy to establish a small committee within the Ministry of Maritime Affairs to look at how we could roll out a marine spatial planning process. We had coordination assistance from UECERMES, and we've also had to delegate the Coastal Zone Management Unit as the lead coordinator for the process. And we've looked to ensure that it is a science-led process along the way, following the IOC UNESCO approach to MSP. The time required for the developmental phase of the MSP, we recognize, must be long enough for full participation. The process also needed to recognize and ensure good representation of all sectors and all stakeholders that would be involved. And there was a need to ensure that any data collected is safely secured and deemed where necessary to be dynamically active and accessible. Now, we recognize that we cannot take the MSP process as a static process, and even if we are able to come up with the marine spatial plan at the designated time, it cannot just be left in isolation, but it must be not only taken to implementation, but must be recognized that there will be a need for refinement of information and updating of information as we move forward. So this is where we are. Most easterly of the Caribbean island chain, land is 432 square kilometers. And we're looking to do what exactly the moderator said initially, to recognize that the ocean space has to be used sustainably and effectively managed while minimizing conflicts around sector users to the benefit of the future generations. We've actually gotten to the stage now where, because of the depth of nature swap that we've done, the process has started. We were able to conclude the deal in September 2020. We've therefore actually finished our first year, and the MSP itself has to be presented within 3 years. It is a very, very tight timeline. And the final MSP, the draft MSP is in 3 years from 2022. The final MSP is 5 years from 2022, with the greatest time thereafter, 15 years, looking at full implementation. So when you look at what we've done in the first year, we've still been trying to establish the unit, but we've really been focused on the collection of geospatial data. We've been working with the Project Steering Committee and the relevant subcommittees to deal with communications and outreach, establishing the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. We've actually done a study tour to Bermuda to look to see how that MSP process was initiated up there, because structurally we thought that it was a very sound approach. And We are also collaborating very closely with the Fisheries Division as data and information in terms of what we collected will be mutually beneficial for our work. And we're getting ready to map the significant activities within the nearshore environment. Now, the approach that we have to integrated coastal management is all these things that you see here. All the activities that we do have some relation with some other agency. So while we're focused on coral reef monitoring, beach monitoring, and oceanographic data collection as a requirement of our office, we also do coastal water quality monitoring, and we share that data with the Environmental Protection Department. We deal with Town Planning Department for the development and assessment of coastal applications. We work with the Environmental Protection Department when dealing with oil spill contingency planning. We work with the Department of Emergency Management when looking at climate change and disaster risk considerations for the island, especially within the coastal zone. We work with the Ministry of Public Works when looking at coastal engineering constructions on some aspects. And we also look within our own selves at how we can more enhance and improve the climate resilient coastal engineering design and construction techniques that we use. We also are very big on coastal hazard and risk assessment, and we work with the Attorney General's chambers in looking at new legislative developments for the activities that we do. Community projects that demonstrate good integrated coastal zone management practices is something that we started in 1999. We've tried where practicable to ensure that that level of activity and community involvement takes place in all the projects that we do. So we always have good feedback from most of the stakeholders involved within the specific project areas that we are trying to do the work. And we try to ensure that the designs that we come up with meet the requirements for both the public as well as the stakeholders in the area. Within the marine spatial planning approach, we have the collaboration of several different activities. We work right now, because these are now taking off in several different departments. We work in terms of mariculture with the Export Barbados group to look at sea moss farming. This is like a fledgling industry that's only started about a year or so ago. They're also looking at the creation of new habitat opportunities that may be associated with the sea moss farming. And they're also looking to get into mariculture, looking at cage culture of certain fish species. We also work with the port, the Bridgetown port, in terms of their planned expansion and development initiatives, which will bring investment opportunities into the future, especially in terms of transshipment activities. Marina development as well within the port and other private areas. We are working with some private sector entities in terms of how marinas can be developed. Obviously, the whole issue of marine conservation and new marine management area designations are all wrapped up in the whole MSP process, because while Barbados is trying to target the 30 goal, which is 30% of the ocean space by 2030, we recognize that if we don't have the science behind it, we cannot actively guarantee that we're going to be able to protect 30% of our ocean space. So as part of the ocean activities that we're looking at, we're trying to ensure that we can do a managed amount of like 15% with the aspirational target of 30%. At that point, I think I would just like to wrap it up. We are very interested, obviously, in ocean energy development, especially in wave power, and we're working with them, and we still continue our activities with the Fisheries Division, looking at the long-line fleets, fish aggregation devices, and the protection of fishing grounds for fishing activities specifically. At this point, I'd like to wrap it up, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we promised you at the beginning, we'll be having the signing of the MOU between the CRFM and the CARICOM private sector organization. Okay. And that's Dr. Antoine will be representing that organization, and Mr. Haughton will be representing CRFM.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So we're pausing to sign a memorandum of understanding between the CRFM and the CARICOM private sector organization. In all the presentations that you have heard over the past hour or so, the importance of the private sector in promoting blue economic growth in the region came up. And indeed, it's extremely important that we engage more effectively with our private sector to bring together the entrepreneurial skills that we need and the resources that we need to realize the full potential of our blue economy space. So we have the resources, we need the expertise of our entrepreneurs and our innovators, and they are to be found in the private sector, which is why this partnership is so important. So we are not only talking, we are putting in place the framework to realize our objectives and our commitments. So this is a significant development, in my opinion, and we look forward to this partnership yielding tangible benefits for our people. Let me hand over to Dr. Antoine to say a few words, and then we execute the agreement. Thank you.
So thank you so much, CEO, and certainly your team for working assiduously with our team at the CPSO in bringing us to this point where today we could be signing this very important MOU between the CPSO and the CRFM. For us, it is important that we act differently to the way that we've acted in the past, and the CPSO, in coordinating the resources and the full capacity of the private sector to more fully achieve the objectives that we have set out in our revised Treaty of Chaguaramas in respect of the agricultural and fisheries development, and of course the importance that now the blue economy and all that goes with it has brought on board, becomes even more important now than it was before. For the reason that we are in the middle of an exercise, as many of you would have heard me say, where a lot of the private sector now finds its actions are data and information driven. And we've taken that approach, which we've expanded throughout, from the leading conglomerates and the large businesses, the banks, etc., that form our executive committee, and I'm representing today the executive committee. And in that work that we've been undertaking, the importance of fisheries to what's been happening with our import demand, with our expenditure on imports of fish, is looming larger and larger. And it's not just canned fish, it's also fresh fish that's destined for the tourism sector that continues to demand, right? A lot more variety, a lot more sophistication, and of course the palates of a lot of the higher valued fish and fish products continues to grow. Some would see this as a difficulty. We see it as an opportunity for us to continue the work that we've done and to de-risk the sector by bringing on stream both the insurance, and I heard the dear sister speak about that when I walked in, but also the issue of how we bring on board the investments to ensure that we cover all spectrums of the fish import and domestic demand that exist. So that, unfortunately, I have too often witnessed, because I come from a small island, Grenada, and grew up in Jamaica, us throwing back substantial bycatch. And my heart hurts me still as I think about the tons of very good protein we've thrown back. And some of it not productively so. We've waited until it's died and we throw it back in and so on. We want to can that. We want to start putting our own capacity, our own resources, our substantial credit union funds that exist throughout the community to work, so that we can start displacing a lot of that, creating employment and excitement among our youth and our people and our officials. So this partnership, as we see it today, is the start of a journey that has taken a little too long, and I'm really happy that CRFM has gone ahead over the years. I've been monitoring closely the excellent work that CRFM has undertaken in the past. All we're doing is adding more, let me not say firepower, that's too real these days, more capacity, and certainly a lot more resources to that journey so that we can get to where we need to get to more quickly. So On behalf of our executive committee, I'm really happy to be signing this today, and more importantly, to making it a lived experience, to using the MOU so that it becomes a fillip in our development along this journey. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to all that will follow.
Thank you.
Yes, and I will.
Here.
I will. Thank you, sir.
Most important tool today.
Yes, yes, yes.
We don't need the third one.
Fantastic. Yes.
Should be here in the jacket. Okay.
Yes.
Ready? Indeed. Thank you. You got that. I'm sure you. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going into our back to our discussion. I'll start with the first question for the day. And considering the region is not what most people say it's smaller than developing states, but are large ocean states with an excess of 2 million square kilometers of ocean space. And what's happening now, the push for conservation over sustainable use, and also our fisheries resources mainly being artisanal in the region. How can we, as a region, governments in the region, after the spatial planning is done, support and encourage retooling and the pivoting of the sector to maximize and unlock the enormous potential of the fisheries portion of the blue economy? How can we do that with all of those considerations? And something I must say, and I hope my friends from Caribbean Week of Agriculture don't get upset with me. It's a disclaimer. Sir, you can help me with the disclaimer. I looked on all the posters around the place. Not one had a fish on it. All the Caribbean Week of Aquaculture posters, they have everything else other than a fish. The blue economy conversations go on around the region and around the world without taking into account fisheries. So how can we tap into that potential with us being bottled into, corralled into this thing of over, it should be, conservation is good, but sustainable use, we need to look at sustainable use and how can we support our small artisanal fishers to maximize our potential. Who would like to take that?
I'd like to take that. So from my perspective, I think, we heard a discussion yesterday about balancing conservation with sustainability. Mm-hmm. We need to have our own people at the table. We need to have our own scientists at the boardroom with those conversations with the large NGOs. From my perspective, this year alone, I've had, just from basic, trying to do social media and reach out to let people know who we are, because no one knew about Caribbean scientists, aquaculture scientists in particular. And you talk about fisheries, let's talk about aquaculture and mariculture. We hear about fisheries all the time. I think we need to divide all three to give its own perspective and need. And we need to have our own people at these tables. How do we do that? We need to start training the next generation. We have very few aquaculture courses at the university level at the moment. Sorry, my voice is going. But I think this is where we need to start. We need to elevate it to the point where we start considering it as a science, we start looking at it from the STEM point of view, and we have our PhDs and our master's science people at those tables. And this year, I think we have succeeded in 1 year in starting to get, myself included, and at least 2 other of the scientists on some of these big NGOs. So I think we really need to start looking at it from the top and going all the way down.
Thank you, Dr. Russo. Anyone else would like to take a bite at that, or are there any other questions from the floor?
Yeah. Okay, that's for the good doctor. I understand that, yes, we need to get on these boards and large organizations and all of that. And you said that we need to, for the long term. But what happens in the meantime? Because in the meantime, stuff is happening. So what do we do? Going around the board, I know that we are known as a people to talk plenty. If you give me the space, give me 2 bullets, I talk to you all afternoon. So what do we do in the meantime, which would bring us tangible results so that the next generation that you are referring to can see something happening and want to get into it? Because if I don't see anything happening with blue economy, for one thing, the next generation coming up has no idea what you're talking about blue economy. As we've said, we know fishing. So if you talk about fishing, fine. But when you come with your fancy aqua this and marry that, I don't know what you're talking about. So how do you pull me into that as a student to get to that point? I am not at the head table or in any big conference or whatever. Right. How do you attract now? What do we do now to ensure that there is sustainability in terms of getting individuals aware and up to date with what is going on? Thank you.
There are 2 things that I'm very aware of what you're saying, and that has come up many, many times. In fact, the other day I was speaking to the head of the who does the curriculum for education, and she herself did not know what aquaculture was. So she made that very clear. And so as our group, we actually started out as a networking organization. So if you look on our website, we have Caribbean Aquaculture Network, and that group has been giving free webinars for the past year using global professionals. It's free, and anybody has been able to sign on. We have over 300 members. What we do need is investment in doing these kinds of projects because they're not free, although we give them free. So first of all, we do need to have that networking. We do need to have those cooperatives where people are going around and talking about this. The second thing is that we are trying to create a webinar actually in November. We're actually working on it to first excite teachers. So we're going to try to put together a webinar where we're going to have at least 50 to 100 teachers, biology and agriculture teachers, come on, and we're going to do our best to explain to them in a very visual way. And again, this is very new. This is the first year. We are trying our best to catch up on what is, how many years behind. But I think this is the best way forward, where we are going to start our marketing in terms of trying to, and we're doing it here, we've been doing it all week, trying to explain to people what is aquaculture. We do want to use a terminology. It may sound fancy, but it's what is being used in Europe and Asia, which we are trying to catch up to. So it's important to use the terminology, but to explain it so that people do understand. So that's where we are, and we do need the investment. So please look on our page and help us with that investment.
Thank you, Doc.
Right. Hello, my name's Anne Ruddy, and I'm from Ireland. We work in seaweed aquaculture. But to speak to this question, particularly around education, I can give my experience in Ireland, where working with the All Ireland, that's Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, there is an education policy where we're getting ocean literacy on the curriculum. Like your islands, Ireland is an island. And our wealth is in the blue economy, which is now being recognized. We need young people to see this as a credible option, as something that they can get excited about before it even gets to university stage. And to create that supply chain and throughput, we can create models, and I'm more than happy to help and work with you. I've been on Erasmus projects across Europe. I've sat on panels of Ensemble Plus, where there are exchange students, and make it exciting, make students really enthusiastic about this and see the opportunity going forward immediately, not sometime in the future, but the time is now.
Yeah, well, you asked actually several questions spanning the involvement of NGO, conservation NGOs and civil society organizations, especially those from outside of the region and the extent to which they're influencing us. You asked about the role of fishers, and I think you were alluding to the small-scale fishers and their interest in all of what we're doing here, and how do we balance their needs and make sure that they are not left behind. And in fact, on that particular subject, the fisher folk over the past few years have been lobbying and advocating for their particular interest. And last year, the CRFM Ministerial Council signed a policy document meant to facilitate the positioning of the small-scale fishers in the blue economy dialogue to ensure that their needs and concerns are addressed, because they have felt excluded from the process so far. And fundamental to success in achieving blue economic growth is the need for collaboration, stakeholder involvement, and participation of the communities that are impacted. And of course, fundamental to that is the education and awareness, so that they can engage and provide informed input and contribution. And so we have to look at strengthening the governance arrangements overall to make sure that, in fact, we are not neglecting and ignoring key stakeholders, as we have been doing. The system is set up now so that key stakeholders' voices are not being heard. They're not at the table. Decisions are being made. And the issue I know you raised about the conservation NGO is that they are increasingly influencing us in directions and taking decisions and implementing measures that may not be popular or even appropriate in our local situation, because they are not based on understanding of the local realities. They are not based on the aspirations and needs and concerns of our women in our coastal communities, in the fish marketing facilities, and and our fishermen. And we implement these sometimes not realizing that they are inconsistent with our own local situation and needs. So there's a lot that we need to do, and it's encouraging, in my opinion, that we are in fact moving in the right direction. When on Tuesday the Ministerial Council of the CRFM adopted the new protocol on sustainable use of the living marine resources that we have available to us in our waters and beyond, it is an instrument that lays down guidelines, principles, standards, and some measures that we should implement to realize more equity, more involvement and participation from all our key stakeholders, from the private sector to the small-scale fishers, to the larger-scale fishers, to the women working in fisheries, also recognizing the special needs of certain vulnerable groups among us, including women, young youth and young men, and especially abled, differently abled people, and some of our indigenous groups that have been just on the fringes. So there's a lot to be done here in reforming our governance arrangements, but we really need to reach out in ways that we haven't done in the past to ensuring that our communities are empowered and that they have a voice and that we are listening to them and not just consult them, in a token manner to say that we have done the consultations. So, it's a very important set of questions that you ask, and I hope I've given some clarity as to how we should move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milton. And there's a question online. Peter, you like to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had wanted to make hot pursuit on something that Milton said with reference to the impacts we have when we're talking about our blue economic growth, the impacts on that we have to deal with coming from the big international NGOs from outside. I wanted to add to what he said by saying that very often we allow ourselves to be driven by them, even when what they're saying is at variance with what our own local expertise, which is as acceptable as anything in the world, and even our expertise, like Dr. Russo there, which is acknowledged all over the world, yet we very often fall under the heels of the big international NGOs or bingos, even when what they're saying is at variance with what our expertise says. And that is a very important thing. If we're going to be talking about an economic growth that is ours, that is our version of blue, that is defined by our needs and our imperatives, we've got to take on board and accept the value of our own profits and put aside this old feeling that a profit should not be recognized in their own country. Thank you. I said enough.
Here, here. Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions from the floor? Any?
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Khadija Hassan. I'm a veterinary consultant here in the Bahamas at the moment. I just have a quick question, and thank you so much for all of your presentations and tips and advice. I'll have to follow up on a few things. With regards to the initiatives and the projects, I just have a question. Has there been any consideration regarding invasive species, impacts on any of the projects? I know we talk about conservation, the management, et cetera, with any of the projects that you mentioned.
Yes, there are.
Thank you.
Looking at that for seaweed. No, you have to. Yes, one of the things that definitely has to be looked at is, especially for the seaweed economy, the invasive species, how the use of Capophycus. So that is, again, where the research and investigations the data needs to be looked at. And so those are some of the ideas that we do need more people looking into those aspects.
And locally in Jamaica, we do take account of the invasive species, even in aquaculture, make sure that we're protecting the environment.
Yes, and associated with that too is the increasing incidence of pathogens and diseases in our marine environment. Some may be associated with the invasive species, but we're seeing changes just like how climate change is changing everything and upsetting the long-established equilibrium. We're seeing these changes. So we really need to strengthen our system of monitoring so that we can understand quickly what is happening and where we can take appropriate countermeasures, we do so. So the times we are in require strengthened surveillance and monitoring systems to understand and respond appropriately to these changes. Invasive species, pathogens, and even the increasing blooms of harmful algae. So we talk about sargassum. The last session was on sargassum, but there is also the increasing incidence of harmful algal bloom that we're dealing with because of the changing environment brought on by climate change and pollution and all these negative impacts. So our scientists, veterinary scientists, I mean, you guys have a critical role to play in ensuring the safety of our marine products, especially those destined for human consumption or animal feed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to take this opportunity to go back to some of my remarks about tourism. And, I spoke about how important it is in the Bahamas and whether or not things like fisheries and aquaculture will get lost. For those who do not know, there is a project underway in the Bahamas. It's $100 million. Big money. So everybody's eyes open really wide, and everybody will say that's such a wonderful thing. This project is linked to those 6 cruise ships I mentioned in my presentation. One of the cruise companies, Royal Caribbean, has a project that's going to establish a beach resort on Paradise Island. Now, this is at a part of Paradise Island where nothing's happening now. It's very close to the lighthouse at the front of the harbor. But they are essentially going to create a place for their cruise visitors and other cruise visitors to go and spend the day on a beautiful beach. And then they will come back and jump in the ship and go on their cruise to wherever else they're going. Somewhere in the accounting of the Bahamas, that's going to be put down under the side of the ledger that deals with the blue economy and advances in the blue economy in the Bahamas. And the number 100 million is going to get put there. And everybody will think, oh, what a wonderful thing. But what will the Bahamas actually get from that? That's all I wanted to say.
Now that we're totally out of time, we'll turn over to Ms. Jude Masters from the CRFM to give the closing remarks.
Good evening, ladies. It's evening now? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasant duty. I have the most pleasant and the easiest duty. Sorry, Dr. Bellamy, you got the hardest one. But help me to thank our presenters. They did a wonderful job. Milton, Dr. Russo, I can give him an honorary doctorate, Dr. Braynen, but he's Mr. Braynen. Thank you all very much. And online, Mr. Brewster, Dr. Brewster, thank you very much. Your insights, they have really shifted our thinking. Those of us who just saw the blue economy as tilapia and shrimp, I know for sure that we're going to be thinking differently tonight. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Dr. Bellamy. You did a skillful job keeping Milton in line. Thank you very much. So we're grateful to you. And ladies and gentlemen, what it would have been without you. We would have been sitting here talking to ourselves. And trust me, we have the gift of gab. We can talk. So thank you for being very good listeners, because that's what we need, persons to listen. And we know that you're going to go away with new thinking and with different ideas and ready to reach out to the blue economy. Thank you very much. Those online, thank you very much for attending. And we certainly hope that you too enjoyed. Well, I certainly enjoyed it, and if I enjoyed it, and I mean, I am the converted choir, then I'm sure that you too did. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for celebrating our 20th year with us.
Before we go, please, I just understand, since I've been sitting here, that Michael Braynen recently received special recognition, honors. I think it's the Merit Order of Merit. Or could you Order of Merit? Right. So we want to just recognize this I would say rightly due recognition that he has received in the government celebration. Thank you. You can explain to us exactly what it is.
Thank you very much. I mentioned in my presentation this is the 50th anniversary of independence here in the Bahamas. And not so long ago, the Bahamas began to adopt its own national awards. It didn't completely do away with those awards from the Queen or King or whatever, but there's a new system of local national awards. And I along with many, many others, received an award earlier this week. My particular one was called Order of Merit, and I'm at the companion level. Each order has its various levels and so forth. And I can say this without fear of contradiction. My nomination was engineered by somebody who I used to work with, but is now working with an NGO here in the Bahamas. And I am so grateful to them and to the others who may have had any part in putting my name forward. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Milton, for mentioning it.
Goodbye. Thank you.